One of the questions that I hear from time to time is to write a debounce function. And if you don't know what is debounce, it means that the function will be called only after a certain period of time, which actually means every single call of this function will be delayed. So how can we implement this function? First of all, we must create a function that we want to debounce. So here I want to create a function, for example, save input, and here we are providing inside our name. So the idea is that inside we will simply console log something and we can see that this function is working. So here is save input and name, and we're using the debounce function, for example, when we want to send some information to the backend. So user is typing something in the input field and we want to wait, for example, 200 milliseconds or 2 seconds after person will stop typing something in the input. In this case, we will send to the backend just a single request to check the validation and not a lot of requests after every single letter. This is exactly why we need a debounce. So we have our save input function and now we want to call a debounce. For example, let's name it process change, and here we want to use a debounce function that we will create in a second. And inside we must provide first of all our function, this is save input, and secondly delay, for example 2 seconds. After this we can simply call process change with a string foo. And actually it doesn't matter how many times we will call this function, the main idea it will be called only once after 2 seconds. So here I want to register new function debounce, and here we are getting as an argument first of all some function, let's name it func, and secondly our timeout. And it is a nice approach to set timeout by default, for example, to 300 milliseconds. This means that it is not mandatory to provide. And now inside our debounce function must return a function, because as you can see here, we are calling debounce function, and process change is also a function where inside we can provide some data for our save input function, which actually means here we must return a new function. And here we want to spread our args, and let's check what we are getting with it. So here I want to console log inner function, args, and we can see in what format we are getting them. I'm reloading the page. As you can see, we are getting 4 times because we called this function 4 times in a function, and here we have just a single argument foo, but this spread with args transformed our arguments to an array, because for us it's easier to work with the array. The second thing that we want to do is create a timer, and actually timer we want to store in the closure here on the top. So here we can just write let timer without any default value. And now inside our inner function, after our console log, we just want to write set timeout, and here we will have a function. And actually the second parameter here will be our timeout, after what time we will call this code inside. And what we want to do here is func.apply, here will be this args. What does it ever mean? So we use here our debounce function, and here we are providing our save input, it's our func. And here is our timeout. So at this moment, this process change is this inner function. And after we are calling this function, we are calling this part. And here we are getting our arguments. In our case, this is array with foo. Here we have our console log, and this will generate set timeout, which actually means every single line here when we call this function will generate a set timeout with this timeout. What we are doing inside, we are calling func, so we are calling this save input with apply this args, which actually means we want to call this function after timeout with the correct context, with the context of this function, and with these arguments. But here we have a problem. When we reload the page, as you can see, we are getting 4 times in a function, and after 2 seconds we are getting save input foo 4 times. And this is wrong, because here we must get it only once, because this is actually a debounce. So we must clear our timer every single time when we make a call to the function, because in this case our previous set timeout must be ignored. And exactly for this we created here let timer. What we can do here, we can assign set timeout to the timer. And actually, if you don't know set timeout, give us back a number. And this is our specific ID that we can clean. This is why before our timer, we can now write clear timeout, and inside we can provide our timer. If it's undefined, it doesn't matter, it won't do anything, but if we have an ID, then previous set timeout will be destroyed. In this case, every single time when we call this function again, all previous timeouts will be aborted, and now we will create a new set timeout, and after this time we will call our function. This is exactly the idea of a debounce. Now let's reload the page. We're getting our inner function 4 times, and now we're getting save input foo just once after 2 seconds. And this is exactly what we wanted when we implemented our debounce. So once again, debounce function allows us to call something only once after a specific time. And this is really important when we're talking about something that user can call a lot of times during inputting in the form, for example.